You have heard about cognition and many things about what we need to do. So here, what I'm going to talk is basically on what are the general myths, or by knowing or knowingly or unknowingly, we come across certain aspects in education that is regarding cognition. So when I move the first thing, so once I was reading a book that is a handbook of family therapy. So I came across with the case of a girl named Sarah. Sarah was a 13-year-old girl. So the complaint when she was referred to the clinician, the complaint was that her academic performance was very poor. Okay, so she was in 8th grade. So what the teachers said, how much ever they tried, her grades are not improving. So they tried a lot. They have given a special training, some kind of tuition, many things. But then her grade remained poor. So what happened was, what happened in the classes, basically in the first hour, first period, she used to doze off. Okay. So she was nodding off during the first period itself. So for the teachers, they didn't understand what was the reason. So if I can ask you, what could be the reason for such low academic performance? Can anyone answer me? Hello? So any answers?
Yes, madam. Not considering her attitude.
So could be the attitude. Okay. Any other answers? So towards the end of the session, maybe we can find out what was the reason. Okay. So now I'm moving on to cognition and learning. I wouldn't be talking much of theory, because I know BEd students study a lot of theories, cognitive theories, developmental theories, many theories in psychology you study. So here, when we think of cognition and learning, or when we think of education, we know that cognition and learning are the two central concepts in education. Okay. And when we think of cognition, so what Neisser says, Neisser is the father of cognitive psychology. So what he says, cognition is a mental process in which our sensory input is transformed, reduced, elaborated, stored, recovered, and used. So this is basically, when we look at this, we know that this is learning. Okay, so learning in the sense, learning in the strict sense, what we use in the educational setup. So basically, when we look at cognition, we know that it the word itself originated from Latin and Greek, and the English translation, what they gave is knowledge. So when we say cognition, why the process, it is basically knowledge representation. So when I ask you certain things, or when I say something, how the information is processed. So when cognitive psychologists collaborated with computer scientists, what we can see, what you are seeing now is the model of information processing. So how our sensory register, the information from our sensory register, and then how it processes, and finally how it reaches the long-term memory. So when it reaches the long-term memory, we try to, the information, there's a lot of encoding process, and then our brain make different neural patterns. So all these things are happening. So when our brain make neural patterns, what we think is it is stored in the long-term memory. So the different codes, different signals, how these codes are created. So you would have heard about many terminologies, that is schema or cognitive maps or cognitive structures. So all these things, very important. So how the new knowledge, how my existing knowledge, and how the new knowledge, how the assimilation or accommodation, how do I accommodate a new information? So that is basically the cognitive model. So the information processing models tell us how we incorporate information. So during this information processing, so here what I'm going to say is there are many myths. So something which we consider quite normal. So the first myth, what I want to tell is, if you have any doubt, I mean, anything to be asked in between, please ask me. I hope everyone can see the PPT.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So the first myth, what I would want to tell is, children who enter formal schooling at an early age achieve better. So here, when we look at in many countries, the formal schooling age, a very early age. So here, what we have is, I remember my children entered into formal schooling, that is their LKG, when they were 3 years, 10 months. And from that time onwards, it was, they have lots to write. So the writing and lots to process. And the explanation, it is, they will learn faster. They have the capacity to learn or process this much information. But then when we look at this, here, what I want to say is, the basic fact is, children who enter formal school at a later age achieve better educational results and well-being. I'm sure many of you teachers may disagree with me. But then the best examples for this, that is the academic achievement and well-being. So here, two aspects we need to look at when we think about education. It's not just the academic achievement, but we need to look at what is whether the subjective well-being of the child. Recently, we have seen that in our state, I think 66 school-going children, that is children between the ages of 12 to 18, committed suicide. So here, when we think about education, we need to look at one aspect is the subjective well-being, and the other aspect is the academic performance. So if you look at the Scandinavian countries, or Finland is the happiest country in the world for the past 3 years. And Sweden, Denmark, Norway. So these Scandinavian countries, they have a system of the children enter into the formal schooling at the age of 7. And the Human Development Index shows that in these countries, this Human Development Index, it is very high. That is happiness, the happiest country. So the tension-free situation. So then when I say this, why 7 years? Why do we say 7 years? What is its significance? So here, when we look at, we know that in a child's life, this years before 7. So it is a period of rapid development. You have already learned about it. So it's a period of rapid, when we say cognitive, the social, emotional, even physical development, we observe how the children grow. And we observe how the cognitive aspects. So when 1 year, the child could look at you, the child could crawl, the child could walk. But then language came when the child crossed 1 year. And then after 2 years, other things, the motor development, everything, all the developments. But then there are many aspects of cognitive development, how the symbolic representation occurs. Okay, and how language develops, and then the social aspect, social interaction. So we know that we give much emphasis to the play aspects of children during these years. And then the emotional. So what we say is, this is a period of formative years. That is the child's whatever behavior. So here, whatever happens during this period will have a lasting impact in the child's life. So that is one aspect, the emotional side. The children, they become secure, emotionally secure. But we are taking away when the child is forced to enter into formal education. So I remember my elder daughter, when she was admitted in LKG. So she was in an ICSC school when she was admitted to the LKG class. I didn't have any other time. Only thing what I had to do was just help her in writing. She couldn't finish her homework. And then the teacher told me that what we can do is we'll put her for tuition. So you may disagree with me. I took my child from the school. I said, I don't want my child to get into a tuition when she's just 4 years old. Okay. So what I'm saying is, the child's, the cognitive, social, emotional, even physical development. When the child is asked to is it okay, clear?
Yes, ma'am.
I thought there was a break because the power went off. So here, when we look at, you can see that there is these years, the genetic and the environmental interaction. It's a period for genetic and environmental interaction. So when I say that whatever the child has got, that is by birth, the innate, and then the child's environment. So here, what experiences the child gets, that makes a lasting impression on the child's personality. So when we talk about why 7 years, I know you have studied many theories, but then here I'm focusing on little aspects of Piaget's theory and then Bowlby's theory. So This is very important in education. And when we look at Piaget's stages of cognitive development, we all know that. We all know the stages. So the 4 stages. So they're from sensory motor to how the hypothetical thinking occurs. Okay, so here how, as you see in the picture, so how the hypothetical thinking occurs, that is from the first stage, sensory motor, to the the 4th stage. So Piaget talked about how children need to be actively explore their environment. So what he said is, on one side, it's biological maturation, and on the other side, the opportunities we give to the children. Okay, so there, the child is an active organism. So it is not, the child learns many things. It's not that everything should be shown to the child, but provide opportunities and facilitate. That's what he said. So when we look at Piaget's stage, I'm specifically interested in the pre-operational stage, because our question is, why 7 years? Okay, so why 7 years? If you look at 7 years, so here, if you look at the picture, so the symbolic representation as such, it's happening in the child in the pre-operational stage. And this 2 to 7, the second stage, Piaget called as pre-operational stage. When Piaget said it's a pre-operational stage, he was talking about the, he found that pre-operational children have certain limitations in their thinking with the conceptual ideas. Okay, so few things what he said is, one is conservation, classification, seriation, transitivity. So all these things, I'm sure you all know all these things. So from the picture itself, we can make out that. So so when here conservation, when the shapes changes, the child thinks that the quantity also changes. So this task the child can attain only after 7 years. What Piaget says is, after 7 years, the reasonable thinking, in the sense, from different perspectives, this pre-operational child is again one important aspect, that is with the thinking of the child. Piaget called the child as an egocentric child. So he termed the process as egocentrism. So here, when we talk about egocentrism, I remember your teacher, Rashmi ma'am. So when we were one day, it is the incident occurred almost 19, 20 years back when we were in Calicut University. So these MEd students were talking to me about how egocentrism was taught in their class. So then Rashmi said, so I sang a song which my niece sings. So that is, Kaka Karumpen Kandal Kurumpen Karvarnan Ende Karvarnan. So here, this Ende Karvarnan, if somebody else sings, what she said is, her niece's name was Shrikuti. So she used to exhibit tantrums, we can say. So that's what Rashmi said. She never allowed anybody to sing that. So that Karvarnan was Shrikuti's always. So that is other typical egocentric thinking. So the pre-operational child, their thought rigidly focused on only one aspect of a situation. That is often their point of view. They don't realize that there is other points of view, or other persons also have same thinking feeling, perceptions. So that is not there. Okay, so here the pre-operational child is with the many limitations. That's what Piaget says. So these limitations make the child, there is what we can see is there is a clear difference in processing information. So this approach, when we talk about this myth, so we can substantiate it with Piaget's theory. So that's one aspect. If you have any questions, you can ask in between. So that is with the cognitive. And then I'm moving on to the next, I told you, one is John Bowlby. So he was a British psychiatrist, and he followed, he started his treatment or work with psychoanalysis, and then he worked specifically on child attachment, the attachment behavior. So what he says is the first years in life, so there should be a sensitive interaction between the mother or a primary caretaker and the child. So this sensitive interaction ensures that the child has attachment security. And this attachment security, which is very important for an individual in the later life, not just during the childhood period, but later life, with all the relationships or with the social interaction and how we interact in a social setting and how we make relationships. Now, what we can see is when we look at adolescence, there's a lot of relationship issues, different kinds. So here, based on Bowlby's approach, the problem is the absence of an emotional security during the formative years. So this period up to 7 years, it is very important. The child should have a nurturing, nourishing interaction. So in that, what he says is the first 3 years with the mother, the sensitive interaction. So that sensitive motherly interaction is the foundation for later relationships. So here, what can happen is attachment insecurity. So many children, when we interact with many children, what we can see is this attachment insecurity is quite evident. So the emotional side needs to be taken care of again with academics. So then moving on to the second myth, any questions? Hello, are you all okay?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Okay.
We can hear.
Okay. So the second myth is the processing difficulties of children in early education calls for clinical attention. So once there was a conference in our department. So that was on learning disability. And then one person presented a case. So the issues, what she said was, one is she spoke about a girl who was 5-year-old girl named Sama. Okay, so the issues, what the girl observed was, one is this reversals. what she said is the child had reversal issue. A 5-year-old child had reversal issue. Reversal, that is, if 3 exactly the opposite way the child writes, and if an English letter A just ulta, those are reversals. Okay, so such reversals was seen in in this girl, and then all of a sudden those difficulty or that particular behavior, it was diagnosed as learning disability. I'm not saying we cannot diagnose learning disability at the age of 5. Of course we can, but then if this is the only reason, then we cannot say that is learning disability. So what I'm saying is children will have processing difficulties. And at this stage, we cannot directly jump to a diagnosis. Okay, so here what I'm saying is the fact is the processing difficulties are due to a mismatch between the child's education and the child's maturation. The question is, if you again think of Piaget's theory, what Piaget says is the child's maturation and the child's activity. That is important. The child is matured enough to do this. That is very important. So we have to look at the developmental milestones. So very young child, 1-year-old child, we know that the child should take minimum 3 steps by the time the child is 1 year old. But we cannot expect a 6-month-old child to take 3 steps independently because the child is not matured enough to do that. Okay, so here when we make a 4-year-old child write, there may be a lot of difficulties. So here, if you look at this this slide, you can see that the typical hand grasp development. So to write something, we need to have tripod grasp. So the tripod grasp help us to write things or hold a pencil properly with our 3 fingers. So here you can see how it changes. Some children with difficulty, they write, but then the normal developmental age is up to 7 years. So again, this is contributing to the first myth we have discussed. Why 7 years? So if you, again, you look at this, the visual motor skills. So the coordination, the one is the eye-hand coordination. So visual and motor. So 3-year-old child can make a circle, but to make a diamond, the child has to wait 7 years. So this is normal developmental pattern. So here what we are saying is this is exactly the processing. This helps us to represent knowledge. This helps us to gain knowledge. So what we, when we talk about cognition, so my writing, my language, does it help me to process information or gain information? That's what we think. So if the child is poor in academics, what is the problem? Is it the processing difficulty? If it is the processing difficulty and if the child has a normal age, the teachers may think, is there any issue with my pedagogy, the way I teach? Do I need to change my method of teaching? So will that help the child? Okay, So how every time what we do is we try to make things understandable for the child. And that's how the child gets or we get information. So here the reversals. So the result is many a times this processing difficulty can lead to, in education, what I have seen in early education, what I have seen is a lot of labeling occurs. So he is a poor performer. He is a buddhu. So there are many labels among children. So this labeling, it directly affects the self-concept of the child. Okay, so the emotional aspects. Then if we look at the third myth, so here one thing what I would like to remember is my neighbor. So she just stays close to my house here. So he has a son named Kannan. So he was 3 years when he went for his pre-primary, the first pre-primary interview. And during the interview, the teacher showed him many objects and asked him to name them. So when the teacher showed apple, the child said apple. When the teacher showed banana, the child said param. So many things, just the child could answer. I mean, when the teacher asked, what is your name? He could answer, he could reply. But all the other questions, the child couldn't reply. Then the teacher asked his mother, how can I admit him? Then the mother asked, is there any problem with my child? Then the teacher said, he doesn't know English. Then the mother said, I didn't teach him English. That's why I brought him to the school. His mother is quite bold. So she said, that's why I brought him to school. You need to teach. Then the teacher said, no, if the child can't follow English, the child won't be able to understand anything in the class. What the teacher said is absolutely true. If knowledge, we have to see whether you and me speak the same language. If we both speak the same language, communication is easier. You understand everything, I understand everything. If I speak a foreign language, which you don't understand, how do we communicate? How do information gets transmitted? Or how do I incorporate some information? I won't get any information. That knowledge representation is not happening. We cannot accommodate or assimilate knowledge, information. There's a block because I don't know this. I don't know this language. So having said Kannan's story, what I'm saying is, the myth is mother tongue needs to be maintained as a second language when children begin schooling. If a child starts schooling at the age of 3 or 4, how can we expect the child not to speak his language? And the fact is, command over mother tongue facilitates one, cognitive development, academic achievement, and learning of a second language. If I know my mother tongue properly, it's quite easy for me to learn a second language. That's what researchers say. See here, Maria Montessori, I'm sure you all are familiar with her. What she said about the only language men ever speak perfectly is the one They learn in babyhood. That is when no one can teach them anything. So mother tongue is very important. Have a mastery over mother tongue is very important for other academic achievement or cognitive development or emotional stability, attachment, security. So here, I'm just talking about what is mother tongue. When we look at the components of language, we know that first is it's the sound. What is the sound I heard first? If I heard my mother speaking Malayalam, that is the first sound I heard, the phoneme. And then the next level, morpheme. How did I combine those sounds? When I had to say Vellam. So how did I combine two sounds I heard? So what was the first word I made? The lexicon, the word. In which language? And which language? The syntax. We combine words. So how we combined? Vellam, avide, vellam. Enikku vellam venam. So that is grammatically we combined the syntax. And then semantics. Which language I spoke meaningfully for the first time? Enikku vellam venam. That is a meaningful sentence. And if you look at the syntax side, grammatically that is correct. And then the which language I can use people, I can converse with others, the social aspects, the contextual aspects, the pragmatics. So when we look at the components of language, these are the components, and these components, how we talk about how my first sound and my first word, my first sentence and my first request. So these three, all these aspects, that makes my mother tongue, the language my mother spoke. So when we look at this, the language aspects, we know that I'm not going into many aspects on this. But then when we look at this, what we can see, you are, I don't know whether you're familiar with the Noam Chomsky. He's a linguist, he's still alive. And every time if you read newspapers or other, we read a lot of things nowadays because it is the reading material, information is on our fingertip. Okay, so we read a lot of materials. So Chomsky, he consistently, he talks against Trump. Okay, so every time he talks against Trump. So so what we can see is he's a linguist, he is a politician, sociologist, or many things. So Chomsky, he is the first person who spoke about the what would I say, the syntactic structure of language. And when he talked about that, he spoke about something called the universal grammar. So the universal grammar, when he said it's not specific to English, it is the person's native language, the mother tongue. So there, if the rules we learn, it helps us in learning other languages. So that though he directly doesn't talk about language, but then he taught. And then Vygotsky, you are quite familiar with Vygotsky's approach. So Vygotsky, when you study cognitive development, probably BEd students study about Vygotsky's approach. So Vygotsky talks about how he gives much emphasis to language in cognitive development. So what he says is language and thought are intertwined. That's what he says. So initially, the first 3 years, he says those are two different aspects. But then when it comes to 3 years, he talks about it merges. And what he says is there is a transition from external to internal. Children engage in a lot of private speech. That's what Vygotsky said. Children engage in private speech. So what is this private speech? When we think about this private speech, so here what he says is that external to internal transmission. So he gives, many of us use Vygotsky's approach when we, in education, we use a lot. So this guided participation, Vygotsky's approach, and the cultural aspects, the social interaction, how an adult can help the child to learn anything. So that's what we do. We assist. So we assist children when we are teachers. We assist our own children. We assist our students. So that guiding. So here, though he doesn't talk directly on mother tongue, but what he says is the social interaction first in the family, then in the society. So that social interaction, from there, the child develops that inner speech, that is mother tongue. Okay, so he gives much emphasis to mother tongue when he talks about this cognitive development. And then when I remember once our Akbar and Birbal's story. One day in Akbar's palace, one traveler came. I think I'm being too passive. Am I? Hello?
No. We are active.
In the sense, what I'm saying is I don't see anything. I don't get any questions. I hope all are here. So here what I'm going to say is Akbar's palace, one traveler came. So the traveler claimed that he knows some 12 languages. And then Akbar asked him, what is your mother tongue? Then he said, that you'll have to find out. He won't say. Because he was using all the 12 languages equally efficiently. Okay. It was with equal efficiency. He was using all the 12 languages. And then it was like a Herculean task for Akbar to find out what was his mother tongue. So then finally, just like as always, this task was given to Birbal. So then what happened was, and this traveler was staying in Akbar's palace that day. At night, he was stabbed by a robber. When he was stabbed by a robber, in the sense he didn't get hurt or anything, but then this was the act. So some words came from him, and the next day, Birbal in the court, Birbal said, his language is Gujarati. Then everybody was surprised. How did you come to know about it? Then Birbal explained what happened in the night. So then finally what Birbal said is, when people are frightened, the language which comes out from their mouth is none other than their mother tongue. So when I tried to stab him, it was Gujarati. He was speaking in Gujarati. So here Birbal was talking about an important point in everybody's life. Anything. So again, if I talk about my my children, we speak our mother tongue at home. Then the teacher asked me, it's better you speak English at home so that children will learn faster when they were very young. That is 4 years, 5 years. I told the teacher, that is impossible. I can't speak English at home because I don't know to express many things in English. I speak Malayalam and I want my children to learn my mother tongue. So that is, I told the teacher, I want them to have proper emotional security. Or when they are in some trouble, if they have to express, the mother tongue is the best. So that's what Birbal was saying. When we are faced with intense emotions, mother tongue is the best language to express or to release our pent-up emotions. We need our mother tongue. We cannot release everything. If you are going for a therapist, psychologist, psychotherapist, it's always better we both converse in the same language. Okay, so here what I'm saying is, now we have many schools everywhere. There's no issue in an English medium school, but then the teachers shouldn't make it mandatory that the children speak English at home. Let them speak their mother tongue. Let them be free. So that's what. And the next myth, what I have observed is, low grade is synonymous with poor intelligence. That is something many a times unknowingly we make this mistake. So many a times here I remember one boy. His name was Prashant. He was a 14-year-old boy. So he was studying in one of the reputed ICSE schools in Bangalore. So when his grades were always poor. His grades were always poor. And I had interacted with his teacher also. So the teacher's expression was, the first expression was, his intelligence is low. I asked the teacher, have you checked his intelligence? Then the teacher said, no, he doesn't score marks. He doesn't score marks. His intelligence is poor. This is not just with this child. I have seen with the other children also. Many times, maybe he is a borderline. This is not just, certain labels children get. So why the child has low intelligence? So this boy, when he passed from the 9th standard, the school asked him to shift the school, because the 10th standard, the school always have 100% and the grades are very high. So he had to move the school. He moved the school. But then later, now he's doing his 12th. His performance is average, not very high or not very poor. But then the boy, he is a really great musician. He composes songs, he composes musics, he does a lot of stage performance, he's a guitarist. But the issue with this child was, it was not his intelligence. This child during his early years was sexually abused for a long period. And you can see how that affects the child and how that reflected in his academic performance. Okay, so many times we make the mistake, oh, this no marks, poor grade, he's a buddhu, he can't incorporate information, he can't study. But then sometimes we need to think, is it only the academic aspects only? Does he have some other issue? Is he emotionally secure? We need to think that. So here the fact is, law grade is not a criteria to measure intelligence. So here, if you look at this, how this IQ distribution. So when we talk about cognition, IQ is an important concept, intelligence. So everything, decision making, problem solving, reasoning, concept formation, everything we can see here. So if you look at this, I'm sure you all are quite familiar with this normal probability curve. So here, if you look at the average IQ of a person is 100, and we can see that 95% of the population distribution, if you look at 95% fall between 70 and 130 IQ. So in a class, you may not find a child who has an IQ less than 70. Or again, it's hard to find a child who has an IQ less than 85. You may find one or two. So for them, we can give specialized training. So his academic difficulty is due to that. But then if you take a class of 60 children, sometimes you may not find a child who has less IQ. Always remember the developmental milestones. We need to remember about the developmental milestones. So whether the child could walk at the age of 1, his IQ quite normal. Whether he could speak, utter few words when he was 1 year old. So all. Yes, any questions to me? Questions, Anda? Hello? Hello?
Ma'am, please continue. Ma'am, please continue.
Okay. Okay. So this is the situation. So we may not find a child who has IQ above 130. If you use a standardized good intelligence test like Wechsler test, it's hard to find a child who has IQ above 130. And a school-going child who can read, write, converse, you may find it difficult with an IQ less than 70. So these are few things we need to keep in our minds. So this labeling, again, it's an issue here. So poor academic performance, it could be due to many other factors. So always we need to, it may be some student specific factors. That is what, maybe the IQ, that is one aspect, but we are ruling out IQ here. Or some other behavioral issues, emotional issues in the child. Okay. Or certain community related many studies have shown that poverty can be an issue in gaining good academic grades. So first we were talking about a case, Sarah. Sarah had low grade in the school. So Sarah's issue was family related. If you remember Sarah's case, Sarah was a 13-year-old girl who had low academic grades. So here on assessment, later assessment, it was found out that Sarah had certain familial issues, especially with accommodation issues in the family. So a very simple reason, if we talk about that, that's something like Sarah never had a breakfast. Sarah used to skip her breakfast. Here, basically, Sarah's parents, they never used to take, they never had the habit of having breakfast. But then later, what happened was when Sarah was born, they forgot about accommodating that factor in their family. But then Sarah had lunch and dinner, but then not breakfast. So when Sarah reached her adolescent stage or puberty stage, she was very tired. She was very tired because morning she never used to have anything. So that was the reason when the family therapist assessed, he found out this reason. And then Sarah was advised to provide breakfast in the morning. Then things became very clear. Sarah was not dozing off anymore. Okay, so what I'm saying is it is not just intelligence. There may be many other reasons for low academic performance. It could be teacher specific. Teacher stress may be the reason, or the child doesn't like the teacher, anything. Okay, there can be many issues. So then the last myth I want to tell is, I'm sure many of you would disagree with me with this. So more homework results in more learning. That is a myth. So many studies have shown that, and your Journal of Experimental Education published from Stanford Research Group. So what they say, they have reported some studies. These studies, I think 2017 or 18 studies, what they say is an additional hour of homework has little or no impact on learning. It is not just this study. There are many studies which talks about, and we are experiencing it. So children, when they bring a lot of homework, what happens at home? Basically, a lot of homework, which the impact is, it's a negative impact on academic achievement and the subjective well-being. So that's what we can see. So what happens when they bring a lot of homework? They don't have time for anything else. They don't have time to play. So what we said is the social development throughout the childhood years, not just up to 7 years, but then later also, it is very important that the socialization, children should play. Do they have enough time for that? So that is what we ask. So what happens is when they bring a lot of homework, there's no parenting. It's only teaching. I told you, my elder one, she is 12 years now. My elder one, when she was 4 years old, she was in her LKG. So she had lots of homework, and that how much that had increased my frustration level, the pressure on me. I never had time to sit with my children as a mother. Always I had to sit with them just like a teacher. Do this, do that, finish this homework. So this was the pattern. So I told you I took her off from the school. So things are quite okay now. But then what I'm saying is, if that can create so much pressure on me, you just think of the child who is undergoing this situation. So the question is it our over expectation or the cultural factors? When we talk about early education and all these things, one thing is some countries start education early, some countries late. There are many cultural, political, social, economic, many factors are there. I'm not ruling out all these things. Based on the culture we live, that is there. But then here, when we look at these are the myths, all these myths for the past few years, what I've seen. So basically, and what I've seen, and if you look at, there are a number of studies which talk about this, how basically when we talk about cognition, how the neural patterns are formed, how the signals in the brain, okay, so how the signals gets transmitted. Okay, so these information, so how cognitive codes are developed, how the schema in my brain. Okay, so these are the things which I want to talk about on cognitive myths. So then what happens? So many things what we have discussed. So basically, when I'm not maturationally ready to do this, how can it affect me? Or if I'm labeled as a bad student. So I again, I remember my neighbor, she had a child when he was in LKG. He was a very smart child. So one day he told me, tomorrow it's a recitation in my school, in my class. So me and one more child will be doing it together. Then I asked, why two are doing it together? Then what he said is, that is one good student and a bad student. You just see the combination. So what have the child understood? So he is paired with another child. This Achu knows the entire song, but then the other child didn't know. She couldn't learn. So she was paired with a good child. Good in the sense that is the information or the concept he learned from the school. So what he has is a positive self-confidence. He's proud, he's good. But the other child, you just think of the other child's emotional level. So here what happens is, so many things, this labeling, attachment, insecurity. So I told you many things can happen when we look at the cognitive aspects of children, that is in early education specifically. So here, when we look at how the child develops the self-concept. So here, when I say the self-concept, though the picture is just school, I'm not saying it is just from the school, how the other interactions, the sensitive interaction, everything. So how the good me, bad me. So here, this good me, bad me, I've taken Sullivan's terminologies, but then not exactly the theory as such, but then good me, bad me. Am I good? Am I bad? So a child who labeled, criticized for everything, who was said no many times. So that child may develop a bad me, I'm bad. But the other child, so I told you good and bad, good student, bad student. Exactly, good me, bad me, the self concept. So what happens is when we look at, so if there is poor academic grade or some issues, what we can see is a stressful teacher. Then if my child's grade is poor, anxious parents, and then the child with a negative self-concept or good with a bad me, what we can say is it's a shattered child. So here, this is the combination many a times. I'm not saying always. I acknowledge the positive aspects of the school, everything, but then certain things, how it can lead to issues, how unknowingly we neglect certain things. So this is the combination. So if this is the combination, what could be the result? We need to think, what are we doing? Okay, so then anything, any issues, if the shattered child, if the child is not given proper care and attention, or many things can happen. He lose interest in learning, stress, anxiety, mild level of depression, or other emotional issues, relationship issues. It could be anything. It is the child is in a chaos. Okay, so that you can see. So here, if you look at again, so what we have seen is 66 suicides among children, that is between 12 to 18 age groups we have seen recently in our state. So what could be the reason? When we think of suicide, we need to think that it is not just one particular event is causing. There are many aspects which is piled up within the child, and maybe an event is triggering the child to commit the act. That is it. Otherwise, it is basically, it's not just one event. Maybe the child, there was a child in Malappuram, because she didn't have a mobile phone for online class, she committed suicide. Maybe the poverty, the low socioeconomic aspects throughout the child's education or life, this has affected her in different areas. Maybe she felt a kind of shame and worthlessness. When this also occurred, the present event, she didn't have a phone to attend online classes, it would have triggered. So we need to take it that way. It's not just one event. And again, there was a 12th standard student committed suicide because she was, it seems she was copied during the exam. One event. There are many other aspects which lead to it. Okay, so we need to think about throughout, we need to look at how the child's emotional side. So one thing, basically, we have to see the emotional needs of these children. Emotional needs. So the need to be loved. I need love. I need care. I need recognition. I'm lonely. I need friends. Okay, there are many emotional aspects our children are facing. As I told, as we discussed, when we look at one thing is there are certain misconceptions about the child's processing skills on one side, and then again the anxious parents are there. When a parent asks a teacher something, please remember the parent is not interrogating as such. The parent is anxious, always stressful. So then the situation is the parent wants to know more. What is the possibilities? What can I, where the child will reach? Is she going in the right direction? So they look upon, the parents look upon the teacher for that, because they think the teacher knows the child better. Okay, so parents, working class, most of the time, early morning they go and late evening sometimes they come back. It may not be the case when we look at the situation in Kerala here, because a lot of IT people and all are there. So that is the situation. So children are alone most of the time. So then how the teacher can help the parent? So when a parent gets emotional, it is just the emotions speak, the anxiety speaks. It's not the parent is against the teacher. So that's what I said. Here, the situation is a stressful teacher, anxious parent, and the child. So this is the situation. So then the emotional needs. So here, one thing what I would like to, is there any question, Rashmi?
Yes. Please interact with madam. Please interact.
മലയാളത്തിൽ interact ചെയ്യാട്ടോ.
Okay, madam.
Any questions you can ask now. If
The
anybody is having any questions, it's a time
my
for
session കഴിഞ്ഞില്ല. Little more is there. But
yeah. In between, if anybody wants to ask anything about the previous topics, you can ask. I think you can continue, ma'am.
okay. So
I think all are waiting for the session to finish.
okay.
And then they will ask questions. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
So then so here something what I would like to what I would like to give a tip for to meet the emotional needs of our students. So one thing is now I don't know if you all are aware of a branch in psychology called positive psychology. What we can say is it is an extension of humanistic psychology and all. So then here in gratitude, I mean, that is extension of humanistic psychology. What I said is it's positive psychology, it is called. So here one thing is now not the negatives. We give emphasis to the positives of children. And in many countries, and even with my students also, I have found it's very good, and it helps children who have real emotional issues. So if we develop a culture of something like a gratitude journaling among children, among students, that is with young students, that is school students, maybe it can help them and it can prevent many untoward events in their life. So here, what the teacher can do is, one thing is, the first thing, when we talk about this gratitude journaling, here I have written, count your blessings and enjoy better health and happiness. So we just look at the positive aspects It's not that the negative aspects are not there in our life. It is there, but then we give emphasis to the positive aspects. So one thing is, the first thing, guide children to make a list of things they are grateful for. So here, what we need to do is, the children need to spend 15 minutes on a daily basis initially. So daily basis, 15 minutes to find out certain things they are grateful for. For example, my brother helped me in my homework. That is something we need to be thankful. Okay, so such simple things, if the child can find out from his life, it is, we can ask, the teachers can ask the child to make a list of things they are grateful for. Give them examples. This is how we have to do. And make them to find out 5 things in a day. 5 things. Here, when we start this, what we need to see is there will be resistance, because resistance is part of human nature. When I'm emotionally upset, I will do many things, many behaviors to resist certain actions. Okay, so that you can expect here also. So write down up to 5 things. In a class, a teacher can do this. And this, in the beginning, ask the children to write daily for 2 weeks. And then once the 2 weeks over, here one thing is, when the children, if they write today, tomorrow, even if you don't ask, even if the teacher don't ask, they will come and tell you, ma'am, I wrote this, I wrote that. The teacher, we need to be an empathetic listener. Many times what happens, the emotional issues, we don't have anybody to listen to us. If there is a person who listens to us, whatever we say, our emotions, when we release, if somebody is there to listen, it gives a lot of relief. Okay, so they will come and tell you, then you have to listen. I mean, the teacher will have to listen to them carefully. And then the 2 weeks over, the teacher can sit and discuss with the child. The teacher can show the child the positives in the child's life. So every time when the child writes this, what happens is, the child is with the child realizes that his life is with positives. Okay, or the child gets the feeling of that grateful or thankful feeling when we feel that something good is happening to us. So this, we feel grateful for our family, friends, teachers, school, the school bus, people in the school bus, our helpers, many places, our community. So these things, they can identify it. Ask them to identify, ask them to write it, and first 2 weeks write daily, and then it is 1 to 3 times a week, but then regular, every time. It can be part of their life. So many studies and many works, and even with my students, this is found to be very useful to reduce their emotional issues and at the same time improve their academic performance. Because on one side, the child feels that the child is not worthless. I told you many a times it is shame and worthlessness. Here it is, I am valuable. The child develops the feeling that I am valuable. I am also part of this society. I have good things. I have good people in my life. So when we talk about this gratitude journaling, it is they identify people in their life and the situations. So here I've given an example how to write it. So we have to tell the students that they have to be specific when they write it. So it is something like, I'm grateful that my teacher helped me out with my math problem when I was stuck today. So the time, the teacher who helped you, or with whom you are grateful, with the teacher, for what? So this, all these specific things should come. So here, when we look at the sentence, we can see that there are many things combined. The people in my life, probably the child never noticed that the teacher helps the child many times. But then the child's feeling is the teacher, she doesn't like me. But then here, again, what we are doing is we are making the child to rethink. Oh, so the teacher likes me, the teacher, I should be grateful to my teacher. So that is the purpose of this gratitude journaling. So this definitely we can make it part of our education, part of our teaching. So if I tell you, you might have read about the public schools in Delhi. Kejriwal, he brought a drastic change in the public schools. So that is, there are, one thing is, there are periods for, one is gratitude period, kindness period. So such periods are there. So their children are made to sit together, talk about different aspects and develop certain character strengths in children. So when children develop these character strengths in education, it will be part of their life. So that is something we can see. And then they should be open communication, parent teacher meeting. It helps the parents, the teachers and the students. So this, I think we have already discussed this open communication. So there, if the child is suffering, the child has low grade, but the child is suffering from certain issues, we have to talk about. We have to talk about the child had this issue when he was in this particular grade, or he had physical abuse, or there is domestic violence in my family, and that is what is making the child to perform poorly in academics. So these things, there should be an open communication. I'm sure all these things you know. So then to end my session, so I would like the teachers to keep 3 questions in your mind when we are interacting with students. One thing is, the first question, what did my children learn today? So here, when we talk about cognition, or when we talk about education, I would like to take education as learning, not teaching. So if I think it is just teaching certain things to a child, then what I would think is, what did I teach today? So there, the teacher's perspective is more prominent. But if I say, what did my children learn today? I taught this, but what did they learn? That is important. So education is a learning process. So that is one thing. And second is the question, are they happy today? we know that the students, they have to be children. One characteristic of children is they are happy always. They are happy always, and then we can see that some children, they're very lonely. Some children don't smile. Children, they have to be active. So the second question is, are they happy today? Teacher can reflect. Are they happy today? Have they enjoyed? Have they actively participated in the session? So that is very important. And then the third is, am I creating enough opportunities to unleash his or her potentials or character strengths? Here, when we talk about character strengths, what I'm asking is, or what I'm saying is, keep the academic grades on one side. When we talk about education, we talk about exams, we talk about the results, we talk about marks. Marks is very important. I'm not saying marks is not important, but then more than that, whom am I shaping? So, am I shaping a kind individual? Am I shaping an individual who is empathetic to the needs of other people? Okay, so the character strengths, the things like love, compassion, things like what? Being kind, generous, the various virtues. What am I? Am I creating opportunities, creating gratitudes, creating happiness? Okay, so these things, whether I'm creating in my, whether I'm developing opportunities, we just discussed about gratitude journaling. So here, when a child does something, simple thing, we say thank you. So acknowledge the child's activity. That so in return, what the child learns is, okay, that gratefulness, the child also learns that. So these three questions, if we can remember every day, it would be really good. And then with Bertrand Russell's, I'm sure you have read many things about Bertrand Russell on education, many things he has written. So something I end my session with this. So what he says is, men are born ignorant, not stupid. They are made stupid by education. So we need to reflect on ourselves, whether how my education made me. What am I? And what am I imparting to my students? You are a teacher, I'm a teacher. It is applicable to both of us. So how are we working with our children? Whom am I creating? So always we are in the process of shaping, especially teachers with young children. They are in the process of shaping. So the expectation from the teachers is very high. So it's not that just the marks, but how as a human being I am shaping my students. So that's all I have to explain. Thank you.
Thank you so much, ma'am. That was really informative. We don't have words to express our gratitude. your class opened a path to completely new world which was ignorant to us. So that was just enlightening. So moving on, if anybody is asking, having any doubts, you can ask now. It's a session for question and answer session. This is a Q&A session. So you can ask doubts now.